Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to Baal HaSulam's Matan Torah with commentary by Rebbe Avraham Morechai Gottlieb. We are on page 118 at the very bottom, section 23. The last class we ended off speaking about the notion of thievery and how we should come to the point of self-awareness that we are all thieves, in the sense that the deepest sense of the word thief is meaning to say that we receive for ourselves alone, meaning we are bringing something from another domain that is not ours, or at least we haven't earned to make use of it and bring it into our own, as opposed to, let's say, eating something with saying the particular formula being the bracha, the blessing on said food. That would not necessarily be considered stealing in the spiritual sense of the word. Even with a bracha, if someone's intention was just to eat the food, just to eat the food purely for their own betterment, not to strengthen their body, not to serve the Creator better, just for their own enjoyment. And it wasn't on Shabbat, because we can enjoy on Shabbat for the sake of the Creator, because He wants us to enjoy on Shabbat. Then that could be considered stealing as well, if we just do it for ourselves alone, even with a blessing. But the principle stands. And we're going to be touching on the other side as far as the ability to connect and encamp with each other in this section. So let's continue. Section 23, the header reads, Israel became qualified to be a candidate to receive the Torah due to two factors: their afflictions in Egypt and the spiritual purification of the nation's ancestors. The Baal HaSulam begins. With these words is clarified what we discussed above in section 5 regarding the Torah being given specifically to the stock of the Israeli nation. For it is certain, and no one would disagree, that the purpose of creation applies to the whole of the human race without any essential difference. However, because of the descent of human nature to the lowest level, as explained above, which is the self-love that unrestrictedly rules over all of humanity, there was no way to begin to negotiate with them and to explain to them so that they would commit and agree, even with a mere promise, to exit their narrow framework and enter the wide world of loving the other. The exception was the Israeli nation, because they were enslaved in the savage kingdom of Egypt 400 years in horrible torments. As a well-known saying of our sages states, just as salt sweetens meat, so afflictions polish a person's sins, as brought in Masechet Brachot, or Brachos, 5a of the Talmud. That is, afflictions bring to the body great purification. I think it's important to note here that body is meaning to say the will to receive for oneself alone. The body, the guf in itself, is a branch that's representing the principle of receiving for ourselves alone. So too, when we do maisim, when we do actions, all the more so maisim toivim, good actions, we are able to go against our initial nature of receiving and at least attempt to be giving, and therefore refine the body in that way too, by using the body physically in order to do mitzvot. Even though praying 3 times a day is a bit more mentally demanding and spiritual as well, depending on one's intentions, just to show up to a minyan in a shul, even if there's no deep connection with the individuals there, just to fulfill the Creator's desire for that individual, it's a huge thing. And to bring your body over there when you don't necessarily want to, and then to use your body to move and to whisper the perfect formula that will elevate your soul, whether you feel it or not, as our sages tell us, that's a beautiful thing. This is a type of refinement of the body that is being referred to here, but this is a bit more physical in terms of the suffering we endured. But it's meaning to say that our will to receive was also slowly but surely over all of the time of our servitude being crushed until we came to that breaking point of our geula, of our redemption, of at least coming to that inner consciousness of desiring it and making way with only the miracle of Hashem's hand, the Creator's hand, of pulling us out of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. As Egypt is representing our narrowness, our self-love, as we'll get into here. The Baal HaSulam ends this paragraph. Furthermore, the spiritual purification of their holy ancestors stood them in good stead. See section 16. And this is the essential factor, as several verses of the Torah testify. The Rebbe Shlita says, regarding the matter of afflictions bringing the body great purification, because of their afflictions, Israel had to unite and throw their self-love to the garbage heap. Similarly, in a time of war, when we all share the same sorrow, we unite and cast away our disagreements and whatever separates us. The Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, hints to a double narrowness. Tsarut ayin, a narrow eye, meaning narrow vision, and Tsarut Leib, a narrow heart, meaning a narrow concern. So the spiritual meaning of subjugation in Egypt is subjugation to the self-love within us. The difficulty of the subjugation consists in the travail of the long struggle against one's self-love. And it is due to this that one can merit to be redeemed from the, quote, narrow vision and narrow heart called Mitzrayim. It's a narrow consciousness, to put into other words. And this is the freedom. This is the true freedom. People have had different notions regarding their experiences in their lives. There's people who used to live in the former USSR and came to America, for example, for freedom. And there's people who are fleeing America right now to other countries for freedom. The dynamics of freedom as we understand it in terms of what we're able to do as an individual, economically and religiously and the like, is well known. But here we see the definition of true freedom spiritually. Freedom means to be free from your will to receive, free from your ego. Meaning to say, you can move wherever you want. You can change your place and change your friends, and you can do a lot. But until you put yourself in the best environment, again and again, slowly but surely growing in the environment, being that we are like trees, we need to put ourselves in fertile soil that has ample amounts of rain so that we can grow appropriately, as opposed to dry land. And we connect to a mentor that we can nullify ourselves to, nullify our desires, and throw our logic and our understanding to the trash heap, and respect and acknowledge the fact that the other person is greater than ourselves, obviously trusting that they are hopefully and ideally a spiritual master. And so through this, slowly but surely, with a friend group that's close and intimate, it has the same desire of reaching oneness with the Creator. Through all of this, we achieve freedom. And given the freedom that we achieved from Mitzrayim, being relatively speaking the lowest of the low, but as Shlomo Melech says, there's nothing new under the sun. So at this very moment, we're in Mitzrayim. If we haven't reached the level of giving to give, we're in Mitzrayim. The fact that we don't have the geula, and we are not in a time of a Torah world run by The righteous king, Melech HaMashiach, as our tradition teaches, also means that we're in Mitzrayim. It's all relative. But may we reach freedom speedily and soon. And the Creator wants us to obviously to have freedom, because the freedom entails our ability to receive His goodness, which is fulfilling the purpose of creation, of His desire to give goodness to creation. The rubbishita continues. The source of the greatness of Israel is how they grew from the suffering they endured. We see from this that an individual can also become great by means of suffering. As the Psalm says, quote, "Blessed is the person whom you afflict, God." From Psalm 94:12. We naturally avoid suffering, but the truth is that one who is afflicted by God should feel joyful. First, because by virtue of our afflictions, we recognize the insignificance of our self-love and so get closer to God. Secondly, afflictions show us the need for faith, the need for emunah, which is the essence of the Jewish people, in contrast to the opposite being doubt, safek. Since they are unbearable without it, being emunah. Thirdly, our afflictions enable us to feel the suffering of others, to empathize with others, truly. So a quick note, I believe we've spoken about it, that as we understand the arch enemy of Yisrael is the nation of Amalek, which is a descendant of Esav. Esav, of course, also representing the will to receive ourselves alone within us, because all the nations in the world and all the names, characters, places, and details of Tanakh are details of inner processes that happen between and within you and I. So the Rebbe Zitzal, Rebbe Baruch Shalom Ashlag of blessed memory, says that Amalek is an acronym for Al Manat Lekabel, in order to receive. Our arch enemy is the will to receive for ourselves alone. That's important to clarify. The Gematria of Amalek is the same Gematria as safek. And concepts and words that have the same Gematria tend to have some type of connection. And if you try hard enough, some are easier than others, we'll be able to make those connections and see and connect deeper principles, and also see the greatness of the Creator, who implanted within His holy language, being Hebrew, an interconnectedness that is mind-boggling and awe-inspiring. There's nothing like it. I've heard from Rabbi Akiva Tatz, great speaker and thinker. He said that if you want to make anyone observant in Judaism, show them Gematria. I think quicker than anything, I also agree, is that if you see the interconnectedness, it's amazing. You really see the greatness in the fine detail of the Creator. And that even so is still just chipping the surface. The rubbishita continues, the desire to receive works on a market basis. The amount we have to endure is weighed against the amount of pleasure we may profit. We can work hard to fulfill our lust, but after we get what we want, we realize that it wasn't worth the effort. Our sages said that whenever we receive a measure of what we want, we then want to receive more. The suffering this entails can lead us gradually to spiritual advancement, because we see that this business is not profitable, and our suffering is getting us nowhere. After experimenting with different ways to fulfill our desire to receive, eventually we can see that the system based on the desire to receive is self-destructive. If we fail to enter the path of Torah and the mitzvot, then the greatness of the desire to receive can cause us to continually increase our chasing after pleasure until we fall exhausted without a breath of life. So our sages tell us that desiring, chasing after things like money, our lusts, and honor remove us from this world. One can understand that if you're involved and thinking about such matters constantly, that you're totally separated from the Creator. Where is the opportunity to have thoughts of giving and loving and emunah and the like when you're involved in those matters? At the same time, I've also heard an idea that you can interpret it the other way, meaning to say that, yes, those things remove a person from a connection with the Creator because the characteristics of those things are intrinsically in order to receive ourselves alone. We want the honor, we want the money, and we want to fulfill our lusts. As opposed to being lustful, so to speak, meaning having a fiery passion and desire for the Creator's Torah and His mitzvot, or wanting to give Him honor as opposed to ourselves, or give our mentors and leaders and parents the honor that they deserve. And money can be used for a holy purpose. And whether it's just fulfilling the laws of Meiser, of giving our 10% or 20% max, or more than that if someone is exceedingly rich, and just a general mitzvah of giving charity, specifically when offered. If someone is asking for money, it's in our best interest in that moment to provide for them. At least that's how the law teaches us. So all these aspects can be reverted, transmuted, transformed into good. The same way the Baal Shem Tov says, there are no negative character traits. There are just character traits used badly. But intrinsically, all of the aspects of ourselves have holy kernels, most holy roots, because everything has the aspect of the Creator at its centermost point. The Baal HaSulam continues, by virtue of these two prior factors, Israel became qualified for this giving of the Torah. And this is why the text refers to them in the singular form of the Hebrew verb for camped, as is written in Exodus 19:2, and there Israel camped before the mountain. The word camped is yachan in this case. We'll speak more about that shortly. Again, and there Israel camped before the mountain, which our sages interpret, particularly I believe Rashi interpreted, that Israel was, quote, as one person with one heart, because the encampment that they did was in the singular tense. This unity was because each and every person from the nation completely removed himself or herself from self-love, and his or her whole intention was only to benefit the other. As we have shown above regarding the meaning of the commandment, quote, and love your fellow as yourself, which is in section 16. Examine this carefully, it says here. So we find that all individuals in the nation united together and became as one heart and one person. For only then were they qualified for receiving the Torah, as was explained. We're now on page 121. Comment 102 by the rubbishita. For only after they accepted upon themselves loving the other, as expressed in we will do and we will hear, from Exodus 24:7, Nase v'nishma, they became qualified for the practical fulfillment of the principles of the Torah. A lifestyle of, quote, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is yours. from Pirkei Avos, Chapters of the Fathers or Ethics of the Fathers, 5:10. Amazing work, highly recommended. It's short and sweet and so infinitely deep collection of ethical statements and wisdom from our sages. If someone sat down and just read all the way through, they could probably finish the whole book within an hour or two without going so deep into the commentaries. I'm just saying to get a brief overview. So it's a short read, relatively speaking, but there's dozens and dozens of commentaries. So much to say about it. Highly recommend it. Pirkei Avos, or Chapters of the Fathers, or Ethics of the Fathers, as translated. So in essence, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is the spiritual level of consciousness that is giving to give. That's the righteousness that we've been speaking about so often. That is the level of a tzaddik. The Rebbe Shlita continues, what relevance do these matters have for us? It can be said that there are three stages in our development. A, we must study Torah so that the light of the Torah will enable us to feel the great corruption in our self-love. B, the light of the Torah should give us a continually greater readiness to annul ourselves and give selflessly. And C, when this readiness has ripened, then we become worthy to receive the Torah. And I think it's important to clarify that it says, when we study Torah, so the light of Torah will enable us to feel the great corruption in our self-love. Studying Torah is not just studying from a text, meaning to say that we can study and learn Torah by acting out Torah and doing it lamaisa, doing it practically in action. Because when we're actually attempting to give to the individual, in my opinion, and I've heard also from one of my mentors, that ideally, on the spot, someone should be, so to speak, watching themselves from a third-person angle and checking their intention and seeing where they're coming from. If not, surely when someone has allocated the time to do a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the soul, for let's say 30 minutes a day, that they were to reflect on their actions and look upon that one when they gave to an individual and check themselves and say, was I giving? Was I loving? What was going on with me? So assuming someone's doing it, whether it's in the moment or after the fact, by doing it, we can notice with the Creator's assistance the evil within and how far we really are from actually giving, and seeing that how much of our giving is actually just in order to receive ourselves. Giving to receive, that is, which is not to be belittled. It's a great thing to give at any level, especially if one desires and knows and is not lying to themselves and saying, I am not giving altruistically. I am not at that level, but I want to be. If I don't want to be, I want to be. The Arizal says, as I've heard from Rabbi Nota Schiller Shlita, the Rosh Yeshiva of Or Sameach, that as long as a Jew desires to desire 13 times back, as long as they desire to desire 13 times back, to come back to the Creator, to have a connection with the Creator, they're still connected. It makes sense that only a spiritual master of the Arizal's caliber could know what the number is and how that works and what the mechanism is. But it's amazing to contemplate, and I think it's meaning to say that we can always come back. There's always an opportunity. It's never, ever too late. I think Rabbi Kiva is a beautiful example of starting his journey into Torah at 40 years old and becoming arguably the greatest of his generation. So too, for us to contemplate right here, right now, what does the Creator want from me? What else can I achieve in this life? And I think achievement is relative to one's refinement of self, and it can only be done in the way of the Torah and the mitzvot. God willing, we will all merit. So, in the psukim, as we read in this last section, the Hebrew word for camped is in the singular, meaning to say, Israel camped before the mountain, and the commentators say, like one man with one heart. So the word is Yachan. Yachan is Gematria 68. 68 is Gematria Chaim, life. What is life? Life means to be connected to the life of all lives. What is life otherwise? To not be connected to the life of all lives. To not have an active relationship, or at least attempt to want and to act in order to build and establish that relationship. Unless someone is connected in that fashion, they're dead. But at the same time, this is meaning to say that we are resurrected and we die many times a day. Any time that I don't have my mind on the Creator, so to speak, I'm dead. Because I'm disconnected from the life of all lives. It's just unplugging the power source. It's disconnecting the channel of energy that needs the machine to run. Chaim 68 is also the Gematria of Bina with a Kolel. Bina is 67. Kolel is the principle that you can always add 1 to any Gematria. That's also technically the Gematria of that word, because the Creator is represented by the letter Aleph, because he's the first and the foremost. And Bina is the level of giving to give. Bina is the level of consciousness of Atzadik. Bina is the level of what we also referenced here by the rubbishita from Pirkei Avos. What is mine is yours, and what is yours is yours. Just giving to give. It's amazing to see how these spiritual principles are hinted to by the Gematrias here. Yachan is also from the Lashon, it's also from the language as the root of Chen, which is grace. Meaning to say, if we attempt to encamp together, if we attempt to come together in unity and love and giving, and if we at least even desire to find such an environment and start that work, then we will receive the Chen of the Creator. We will receive the grace of God. Because those that want to do the work will be assisted from above. No questions. That's how it is. That's the story. That's how he built it. That's the system. The Atbash of Yachan, Atbash being the opposite corresponding numerical value, the Yud, for example, in Yachan turns into a Mem, meaning because Aleph turns into Tav, Bet is to Shin, so on and so forth, going inward. So Yachan is 109, and 109 is Gematria Aim Kol Chai, which is what was the title given to Chava, the wife of Adam Harishon, the mother of all life. I haven't seen it inside, but I'm sure one can expound the Kabbalah of this order of Aim Kol Chai, because Aim, as I've heard from the rubbishita, is referring to the Ima Eliona, the upper mother, which is Bina, which is what we're talking about here, the level of giving to give. And then Kol is Gematria 50, which is also a hint to remez to Bina, because there is the 50 gates, the Chamishim Sharim of Bina. And then Chai generally is corresponding to Yesod, which as a function in the limud of Kabbalah takes in all the light of the other sfirot and feeds it into the vessel, which is Malchut. So too, that's actualized in the physical world, as Yesod corresponds in the physical body, just in terms of understanding how the principles are brought down to the male organ, to the Brit Milah, the holy Brit Kodesh. And with this holy Brit, we are also able to transfer light in order to fill the vessel and create life, create Chaim. The difference between the Atbash and the Gematria for Yanach, meaning 109 minus 68, is 41, which is Aim, which is the Ima Eliona, as I've heard the Rebbe Shita say, which is Bina, which again is hinting to this level of giving to give, which is this whole matter of being encamped together and throwing away our ego to the curbside. And this is just one word that I was inspired to dig into. I can only imagine all the words and all their interconnectedness, let alone the tropes and the accents of all letters. That I'm under the impression is the Torah that is beyond this lifetime. That's the type of Torah we're going to be learning in a totally different state of consciousness beyond our bodies, to discover the secrets of all the crowns of the letters and the like. But exciting to contemplate. It's amazing. Tov, we ended in the middle of page 121. We're going to be continuing with section 24 next class. Pleasure as always. I will check the YouTube real quick to see if anyone's been asking any questions or commenting. Seems not. Tov. All the best.